In Russia, there is a dark purple berry that grows in nearly every region of the country. You can find it in home gardens from Moscow to Siberia. Russian grandmothers press it into juice, pharmacies sell it as medicine, school children recognize it by name. It has been part of Soviet and Russian food culture for the better part of a century. That berry is not Russian. It is American. It grew wild across the eastern half of the United States for thousands of years before anyone in Moscow had ever seen one. Native peoples from the Great Lakes to the Appalachian foothills used it in pemmican, in dried food stores, in medicinal preparations passed between generations long before European contact. It is called aronia, sometimes known as the black chokeberry, and by nearly every modern measure of antioxidant density, it outperforms every fruit on the planet. More than acai, more than blueberries, more than pomegranate, goji, or mangosteen. When researchers measured oxygen radical absorbance capacity across hundreds of fruits, aronia did not just win. It dominated. Some analyses place its antioxidant concentration at more than 10 times that of acai pulp. The same acai that Americans now pay $8 to $12 a bowl for at smoothie chains in every major city in this country. But here is the part no one discusses. You cannot walk into a grocery store in any state in America and reliably find fresh aronia berries. Most Americans have never heard the name. The country that grew it for millennia does not cultivate it at any meaningful commercial scale. The country that took it roughly a century ago built an entire agricultural sector around it. That transfer has a name and a date. In the early 1900s, a Russian plant breeder named Ivan Michurin began importing American plant specimens for research and adaptation. Michurin was one of the most celebrated botanists in Russian history, a man who spent decades collecting plants from around the world and testing them for cold hardiness, nutritional value, and yield potential. He was searching specifically for species that could feed a country defined by brutal winters and painfully short growing seasons. Among the many specimens he brought back from North America was Aronia melanocarpa, the black chokeberry. Michurin recognized something that American agriculture had entirely overlooked. This berry could survive winter temperatures that would kill most commercial fruit crops. It could grow in poor, marginal soil without complaint. It required almost no chemical input and practically no maintenance, and it produced dense, heavy clusters of fruit packed with more protective compounds than anything else in his entire collection. He began breeding it immediately, improving its yields, selecting for larger fruit size and heavier harvests. By the time of his death in 1935, aronia had already begun spreading across Soviet research stations and experimental plots. What happened next was not accidental, it was systematic. The Soviet government, facing the constant pressure of feeding a vast population spread across some of the harshest agricultural climates on Earth, recognized aronia as a strategic crop. By the 1940s and 50s, it was being planted deliberately on collective farms across Russia, Ukraine, and the Baltic states. Soviet health authorities eventually went further and classified it as an officially recognized medicinal plant. It was recommended for circulatory problems. It was prescribed for hypertension and for recovery from illness. It was planted in schoolyards, in municipal parks, in the small private garden plots that Soviet citizens tended behind their apartments. It became ordinary. It became everywhere. It became completely integrated into the fabric of daily life. While Russia was building an agricultural infrastructure around an American native berry, America was moving decisively in the opposite direction. The post-war period brought a radical consolidation of American farming around a small number of commodity crops: corn, soybeans, wheat, cotton. The United States Department of Agriculture, the land-grant university extension services, and eventually the Farm Bill itself all oriented around a single objective: maximizing yield and export volume for a handful of heavily subsidized staples. There was no incentive structure for small native fruit crops, no price support, no meaningful research funding, no distribution infrastructure, no crop insurance eligibility. Aronia, along with dozens of other indigenous food plants that had sustained life on this continent for centuries, was simply left behind. It was not banned, it was not uprooted, it was not burned. What happened was something quieter and in many ways more effective than any of those things. It was defunded. It was omitted from nursery catalogues. It was absent from agricultural extension recommendations. It was excluded from every structure that determines what American farmers actually grow. Over the span of roughly 50 years, a berry that had fed human populations on this land for thousands of years became functionally invisible in its own homeland. And then, beginning in the early 2000s, something almost absurd happened. The American health food market exploded with interest in antioxidant-rich superfruits. Acai from Brazil, goji from China, mangosteen from Southeast Asia. Billions of dollars poured into importing, processing, marketing, and distributing these fruits to American consumers who were desperate for nutritional density in a food system increasingly stripped of it. The packaging was beautiful. The branding was aspirational. The price points were extraordinary. And the supply chains stretched across oceans and through multiple layers of processing before a single berry reached an American mouth. Nobody in that booming industry paused to look at the hedgerows of Pennsylvania. Nobody surveyed the woodland edges of Wisconsin or the creek banks of Virginia. Nobody asked the most basic question imaginable, which was whether something already growing on American soil might outperform everything being shipped in from 10,000 miles away. The answer had been there the entire time. It was just not profitable in the way the import model was profitable. Importing acai requires a controlled supply chain, proprietary freeze-drying technology, brand name licensing agreements, and premium retail margins at every step. Growing aronia in Iowa requires a field and some patience. The economics of the superfood industry were never really structured around nutrition. They were structured around margin. Today, Poland has quietly become the largest commercial aronia producer in the world, growing tens of thousands of tons annually for juice, extract, and supplement markets across Europe. Russia still cultivates it widely, a permanent feature of its agricultural landscape. In the United States, a small but slowly growing number of farmers in the Midwest have begun planting aronia on modest acreage, mostly in Iowa, Nebraska, and the Dakotas. But the scale remains negligible. American-grown aronia is a footnote in the country where the plant originated. The nutritional research, meanwhile, has only become more compelling. Studies have linked regular aronia consumption to improved cardiovascular markers, measurable reductions in oxidative stress, and anti-inflammatory effects that rival pharmaceutical interventions in certain clinical settings. Its anthocyanin concentration, the compound class responsible for the deep purple pigment and much of its biological activity, is among the highest ever recorded in any food source. This is not a marginal improvement over other berries. It is a different category entirely. And yet the average American has still never tasted one. There is a pattern here that reaches well beyond a single berry. It is the pattern of a country that systematically dismantled its own indigenous food diversity in favor of industrial monoculture, and then spent the next generation importing back at enormous cost the very nutritional qualities it had stripped from its own land. The soil never forgot aronia. The markets forgot it, the institutions forgot it, the policy frameworks designed to shape what America grows and eats forgot it completely. The plant still grows wild across more than 30 states. It still fruits reliably without irrigation. It still survives winters that shut down commercial orchards. It still produces more measurable antioxidant density per acre than any orchard crop currently in the American agricultural system. Russia did not steal it in any dramatic sense. They simply paid attention, they studied it, they planted it, they built systems around it. And while they were doing that, we were subsidizing corn syrup and importing Acai from the other side of the equator. The plant is still here. It has been here the entire time. The only real question is whether the country that grew it first will be the last one to understand what it had.